everyone. Welcome to the Ghanaian-American Journal's maiden edition called the Fireside Chat series. My name is Fred Kojo Asamoah. I'm the founder and editor of the Ghanaian-American Journal, and I'll be your host. The Ghanaian-American Journal has curated the Fireside series to bring you engaging conversation, bordering on governance, business, and education, because we realize that there is room for us to grow as Africans, Ghanaian immigrants in America. So the basis for this show is to help inspire and educate our people so we can develop together. We hope that you can continue to join us so that together we can build stronger and prosperous communities. We are especially delighted today to have with us a very inspirational gentleman. In fact, many of you have seen him on social media. A friend of mine told me yesterday, Ghanaians are so happy when they hear his name. So already he's buzzing everywhere. And I can understand that sentiment. So we worked really hard to get Kojo with us today. In fact, he was very gracious, and we really didn't have to work too hard for that. He was a very gracious gentleman, and for that, I really appreciate that. So please, he is ready. He's joining us from Oklahoma. This show is meant to be a one-on-one discussion. Sometimes we have a panel. The goal is actually to go to the site, of the individual, but because of the COVID-19 crisis, we have to do it by Zoom. And we hope in a few months' time, things will change and we will be able to bring you different shows, which will be live on Facebook, Instagram, and hopefully LinkedIn as well. Kojo, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Kojo, please tell us, who is Kojo Asamoa-Caesar? And I'm actually a bit curious about the Caesar. If you can explain to me where that came from.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So Kojo Asamoa-Caesar, well, hold on, let me stop. I'm getting some feedback. Do I need to do anything on my end? Like mute anything, or am I good to just talk?
You could try to lower it just a little bit, but I think you should be fine.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I am, first of all, a husband, all right? Me and my wife, Onika, have been married for 4 years. We met on June 4th, 2013, and we got married June 4th, 2016. And so I take that responsibility very seriously. I am also a new father. We just had a baby girl. Her name is Hadessa. She was born on April 10th. So she turns 14 weeks old actually today.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
14
and
weeks.
then I'm a son of immigrants who came to the United States from Ghana. Both my mom and my dad made the 5,000-mile trek across the Atlantic to come here in pursuit of the American dream. And that story and their decisions has really done a lot to shape my life and my journey. So I really see it as a continuation from one generation to the next. The Kojo Asamoa-Caesar, the Caesar part, I was also curious about, because when I'm actually a junior, my dad is a senior, but when I was born, he wasn't in my life. He wasn't there. And I didn't meet him until I was 22 years old. And there I found out that when he was a younger man, he had been taken in by an Italian family that was living in Liberia, right? So he lived a few years in Liberia, and they had taken him in, and their last name was Caesar, and he fell in love with them and almost became part of the family, so much so that he adopted their name and he hyphenated it on at the end of his last name. So yeah, that's where the Caesar comes from.
So could you tell me, you did mention about something about your parents. Now, have you been to Ghana?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I told you my dad was not there when I was born. So my mom was a, 26-year-old single mother working,
Yeah.
trying to go to school. It was hard to care for me. So at the age of 2, she sent me back to Ghana to live. So I lived in Accra from age 2 to 10. So that's where I really grew up, and my formative years were spent there. And, I learned the values, and I had great friends and great family. And it was a joyous, upbringing in Ghana.
Wonderful.
It
So
happened.
you did mention to us that, you've been to Ghana. I actually heard you say a few words in Cree. So, I think you have some, you do have a little bit of knowledge about the Ghanaian language.
Right.
And maybe later on down the show, we'll ask you some few words and see how you do. But tell me something about your family. Right now, you are married. You have a 14-month-old daughter. Her
14
name is
weeks.
Hadessa.
Yeah, 14 weeks.
14 weeks. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about your new family, I should say.
Yeah, my wife, she comes from California, right? I came from Alexandria, Virginia. So I came from the East Coast. She came from the West Coast, and we met in the middle in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it was destined to happen. We both came here to become teachers. Even though we didn't go to school to be teachers, we felt called to education and early childhood education specifically. All right. So she wanted to teach first grade. I wanted to teach kindergarten. And then before we even got here, we had signed leases in the same apartment complex. And so her apartment was right above mine, right? And then they had the program we signed up for to be teachers, Teach for America, placed us in our placement schools, and our schools were just blocks apart from each other, all right? So we couldn't have avoided each other if we tried, all right? And we became fast friends and developed a friendship, and then ultimately fell in love, and then got engaged and then got married. And then 3 years later, our bundle of joy arrived, this April, Hadessa Eden. And the name, my mom gave her Eden, her middle name, right? And we all know what Eden is in the Garden of Eden, and being in the presence of God. And for her first name, I knew that I'm a man of faith, and I knew God would give me a name. And so I was like, I'm not gonna, force it. We'll see what comes of it. And in the pregnancy, we got to a point where, the baby can hear outside voices. So my wife is like, hey, you have to talk to the baby that's in my belly. You got to read to her, right? So one night I was looking for a book. There was no book around. So I just took my Bible off of my nightstand and I opened it. And since I'm having a girl, let me open to one of my favorite books, about, great women in the Bible. And I opened to the book of Esther. And I start reading the story, and it's one of my favorite books. But my wife, hadn't really delved into that story before. So she's enjoying the story herself. And so we go to sleep that night, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe I could name my daughter Esther. But I know my wife is not going to go for that, because Esther is just a very common name, right? So we keep reading, and, over the next few days, and we arrive at this chapter where we find out that Queen Esther's given name was actually Hadessa, all right? And so when we came upon that, we're like, wow, what a beautiful name. And then we're reading about Queen Esther, and she's, this brave and courageous young woman who ascends to the position of queen for such a time as this, right? And she has to advocate on behalf of her people, even to death, right, if it takes that. And we were just so inspired by that story, and we felt God was calling us to call our daughter Hadessa, because those are the values that we want her to embody. So that's how that name came to be, Hadessa. Yeah.
Wow. You just went right into my next question, because I meant to ask you if you are a man of faith. Clearly you are, and you speak very eloquently about your faith. But can you also tell me, how has your faith helped you to get to this point?
Man, it has been indispensable. So my mom arrived in America at the age of 23, worked so hard, breaking her back, sometimes working multiple jobs, still trying to go to school to complete her education. At the age of 39, the years of stress finally caught up to her and she suffered a stroke, right? Spent some time in the hospital, racked up medical bills. The whole left side of her body was paralyzed. And the family decided it would be best for her to go back to Ghana to recover and for a family to take care of her. And so here I am, I'm 14 years old, and my mom is leaving. And I don't have my dad in my life. I'm about to move in with my uncle, who's the taxi driver, and his family. And so my mom, the only thing she knew to do to give to me and to leave for me was her Bible, right? And she said, son, I'm giving you my Bible. I need you to read this every night, all right? And, you know, I'm a 14-year-old. I'm not trying to read the Bible. I'm like, Mom, I don't even understand this old constipated book. Like, you know, she said, it doesn't matter if you understand it, just read it. So I made her a promise that I would read the Bible. And it changed my life. And in the beginning, it was boring. I didn't understand what I was reading, but I stuck to it. And it has made all the difference in my life. I found purpose. I found self-esteem and self-worth that, you know, I was created by God. I was put on this earth for a reason, and that he put in me gifts and talents, and that I was to, you know, develop those gifts and talents and serve them to the world and create a better world than the one that I found, all right? And that people would see my good works and see my Father in heaven and give him the glory. And so it made all the difference in my life, and I'm thankful that my mom left me her Bible, and I still have that same Bible to this day.
Wow, that's a pretty amazing story, very touching, and it kind of paints a good picture, you know, of you as a son, you know, of Ghanaian parents, you know,
Right.
and how much faith means in the Ghanaian upbringing, and you know, no matter where we travel to, it follows us through, and we, you
Exactly.
know, sometimes most of the time, I'm very lucky to pass it on to our kids, just like your mom did for you, and
Exactly.
it's very great to hear that.
Exactly.
Kojo, so tell me a little bit about your education. I know you went to school in Virginia. You went to is it Old Dominion
Yeah.
University, and then you went on to law school.
All right.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, my education actually first started in Ghana. So I went to St. Anthony's Primary School in Ghana, and I loved it there. I made great friends. We loved to play soccer. I loved to buy bullfruits after school was over. So it was great. And then, yeah, when I came here, I lived in Annandale, Virginia. Went to Fairfax County Public Schools, great school district. Really had great teachers who encouraged me, told me I had great leadership potential, and that stuck with me. And I was fortunate enough to go to Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia, and really came into my own in college, right? And got to really get involved on the campus. So not just in the classroom, but also on the campus. By the time I was graduating, I was student body president of a campus that had over 20,000 students. I was a resident assistant. I led a Bible study on campus. And I was also founder and president of the largest community service organization on campus.
Wow.
All right. So those college years were very formative and really gave me the sense that, hey, I have something to give, right? And I want to take it as far as I can take it. And then I applied to law school and was accepted to law school at the College of William and Mary, which is the oldest law school in the nation, alma mater of a lot of the founding fathers. And interestingly enough, it's located right 5 minutes away from Jamestown, Virginia. And Jamestown is where the first, right,
The ship arrived.
the ships, arrived, from the New World to from the old world to the new world. And so if you trace it all the way back, we, on the coast of Ghana, right, we have these slave castles where they'll put, enslaved human beings in the ship, go through the Middle Passage and land in Jamestown. And here I am all these years later, as a descendant of Africans, here and going to law school in this same town. So it was surreal, and it allowed time for reflection and history.
Yeah, it is particularly surreal, if if I can say that, because yes, you started in Jamestown, and now you've ended up in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Now tell us that history about Tulsa, the Black history about Tulsa, that rich history, and how you moved from Virginia and ended up in Tulsa, and kind of following through, that rich history of the slavery and black identity.
Yeah.
I know you have a very good story there.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you see the lines and the threads coming together, right? From my faith to understanding that I have a purpose, that I was put here for a reason, that I don't just make decisions just because it's the next thing to do or because everybody else is doing it, right? And so I'm prayerful and I go to God and I ask him for, guidance and to order my steps. And so after law school, I decided that I was going to become a kindergarten teacher, because that's what I felt God calling me to do in the evolution of my purpose and my service. And I'm the only law school graduate that I know who's ever become a kindergarten teacher after graduation. And I was so passionate about this and wanting to make a difference that I said to the program, I want you to take me to wherever the need is highest. So I don't care where you take me, just let me know where the need is highest and I'm willing to go. And so they sent me to Tulsa, Oklahoma, unbeknownst to me that I would be sent to teach in a community that was known as Little Africa, right, and Black Wall Street, because in the early 1900s, the most prosperous African-American community existed right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right, in a time of segregation and Jim Crow, right, and oppression, right, that was, in our laws here in the United States. These Black Americans, these descendants of enslaved people, were able to build a community that had its own school system, right, had its own hospital system, banking system, right, businesses that were thriving, just amazing. And unfortunately, in 1921, June 1st, white supremacists and residents here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who were envious and jealous of this success, burned down Black Wall Street, burned it to the ground. As many as 300 Black residents of Greenwood, Black Wall Street, perished, and that number is probably higher. And the businesses were burned down, and it's just unfortunate. It's an unfortunate history. And now here I am in this community teaching kindergartners who are the descendants of this great and rich legacy. All right, so it's just amazing that my steps would be ordered in that way, and that I'd have the opportunity to serve and help this community to reclaim such a rich legacy.
Yes, that's really interesting. I'm glad you touched on that, that transition. And I think it has really helped you, because I when I listen to you, from your very early childhood, civics, it seems to be something that meant a lot to you. And, you've been serving your community for a long time through college and everything like that. And now, you went to law school and decided, I'm going to teach instead. And you've done that through, and you ended up becoming a principal of a school. And now you're running for Congress. So that talks about the spirit of service that is within you. And, it's really fascinating to see that, that people just want to give, to your community as much as they can. And that's so important, especially now. I also realized that you do, Tulsa is a very predominantly white community, right? And here you are as an African or African immigrant or African-American immigrant, living in Tulsa. And I look at your numbers, you won 63% of the votes against a white contender. And, the population of Blacks in Tulsa is only less than 10%. How did you pull that off?
Thank you. That's a great question, and one that I get often from folks who are not here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Well, it started with me not coming to this race with my own biases about what was possible, right? And I think my journey showed me that, the college institution that I went to, Old Dominion University, was a predominantly white institution. William and Mary was a predominantly white institution. So I'm not new to being a Black person, being in predominantly white institutions, right? And being around white people, and having to talk and persuade, people to see things the way I'm seeing them. And so I think I was prepared to enter this race with the unique demographics that we have here in Tulsa and in the 1st Congressional District of Oklahoma. And what I found was that if I went to people and I was genuine and I was authentic and I told them my story, right? Because my story is not a Black story. It's not an African story, right? It's really a human story, right? And it's steeped in the American story. And I started off telling you my parents came here in pursuit of the American dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the American dream is a major theme in my life, and it's a major theme in America. If you are a parent, I don't care if you're a white parent, if you're a Native American parent, right? If you're a Hispanic parent, you want to be able to have opportunity to work to build a better life for yourself, and then to be able to enable your kids to also have those same opportunities and do even better than you did. All right. So that's the essence of that American dream. And so I told people my American dream story. And then in the broader political environment now, where we have a president who's talking about make America great again, but he's proposing that the way we make America great is to build walls, right? So I talked about we want to build bridges instead of walls. And what makes America great for Donald Trump is that we have to send all these immigrants back to where they came from, right? To either the shithole countries they came from or to the, right, Mexico where they're sending their rapists to us, right? So I can also say, well, actually, I think what makes America great is actually the fact that it's a nation of immigrants, and that in its founding documents, it said that we are all created equal, all right? And you don't have to be born into a rich family. You don't have to be born into a family with a good name. If you're willing to work hard and follow the rules and pursue your dreams, then you have opportunity and you may be able to find success and rise from your station, all right? And so when I was able to present that contrast, it resonated with a lot of people, no matter what their background was, all right? And that's how we're gonna win this race in November. It's about offering that contrast about what kind of future we want for our country. Do we want a country that's expanding opportunity to more and more people? Or do we want one that's restricting opportunity and scapegoating certain groups and pitting one group against another group just for the political benefit of the elected leaders, right? And I don't think that's the kind of country that Americans want. I don't think that's the kind of country that Oklahomans want. And I'm offering another alternative and a different path.
That's wonderful. So considering again the recent protests that has been taking place in the country, and looking at your the percentage of African Americans in your district,
right,
as compared to the predominantly white population,
right.
How do you plan to address the systemic issues that are going on in the country or in the district?
Yeah.
And how do you plan to keep that balance?
Yeah.
I know that's a very difficult position to be in.
Yeah, and so let me lay out for people. So the demographics, we have about close to 70% of the 1st Congressional District of Oklahoma is white. About 9% is Black. About 10% is Hispanic. And then about 7% is Native American. So we have, a significant Native American population here in Oklahoma. And so Black Lives Matter. So yeah, so the difference between the Black Lives Matter movement that we're seeing now sweep across not just Oklahoma, but the whole nation, contrasting that with the civil rights movement, right? The civil rights movement and the protests we saw then in the early 60s was mostly African Americans in the streets protesting, all right? Now, you look at what's going on here and you go to some of these protests, and sometimes there are more white people out in the streets than Black folks, right? And I looked and was paying attention to the protests that happened here. And you had a lot of white folks. And even for our campaign, we had a lot of white women reaching out, saying, I normally don't pay attention to politics. I try to stay out of it because, I don't like conflict. But I am watching these images, come through my TV screen, police officer kneeling on the neck of a innocent, unarmed Black man who's crying out for his mom. And it has touched me. And I am realizing that my silence has contributed to this violence. And I don't want to live in a country like this. And I don't want my kids to live in a country like this. So I want to do something, all right? And so people got up. And because we're also in this pandemic phase where we had these stay-at-home orders and people had been home for a long time, this was an opportunity for people to go out again, right? And so they were able to go out into the streets, protest, meet other people, hear stories from other people, right? And it gave them the impetus to, hey, I can actually be a part of making change. And now I protested, what else can I do? Well, I can register to vote, all right? And then I can vote for Kojo. I can vote for elected leaders that are about the people, elected leaders that have a conscience, that have character, that want to bring people together instead of divide us, that want to solve our problems, right? Instead of sweep them under the rug. And so I realized I don't have to do a balancing act, all right? I just need to be myself and speak my truth and then listen to people, right? And connect the dots with people so that this issue of Black lives, right? And unarmed Black men and women being killed by police, it's not just a Black issue, right? The racial issues we're facing in America, it's not just a Black issue. And I think white people are waking up to the fact that this is also a white issue, right? And we have to all fix it together, right? And so that's what's happening here. And because we've been speaking our truth, we didn't have to meet the moment. The moment met us. And now we just have to bring more and more people together to try to create a better community for ourselves and for our children.
Great, great. So this past week, we heard that the governor of Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt, tested positive for the COVID-19. And I know he was at the rally that the president held a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
Can you tell us, is Oklahoma or Tulsa in particular, are they taking the COVID-19 crisis seriously?
Well, the president of the United States, who's a Republican, has politicized a virus that is driven not by politics, but by science, right? So he's made it a political issue. And so something as simple as wearing masks so that you can protect your neighbors, right? Love thy neighbor and wear a mask so that you do not infect them unknowingly, because we know that it takes about, 2 weeks for symptoms to start showing. So you may have it and you may not know. So wear a mask. It's very simple. And yet it's become a political issue. So now you have certain Republicans and Republican leaders who do not wear masks, right? And they discourage people from wearing masks. My opponent, Kevin Hearn, was caught on video at an event saying he loves coming to the South because nobody's wearing masks and it feels like America, right? Such irresponsible behavior by an elected leader. And so I'll say that our Republican elected leaders have not taken this coronavirus pandemic as seriously enough, right? And they have not set the right example, and they have not also enacted policy that will enable others to be able to protect themselves and others. And because of that, Donald Trump decided he was going to hold his first rally, large event that was going to happen globally, right, by this president. He was going to hold it right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right, because he knew we had these Republican leaders who were going to roll out the red carpet and receive him, right, in an arena that holds over 19,000 people. So you're going to have all these people crammed into this one spot, just breathing on each other. Thankfully, Oklahomans are smarter than the president gave them credit for. And so instead of 19,000 people showing up, only about 6,000 people showed up, right? So the arena was largely empty. And because I think people realize you cannot fool a virus, right? You cannot politicize a virus, it doesn't care what your political party is. It doesn't care what race you are, all right? You'll be infected if you don't take the proper and necessary precautions. Coming to our governor, who is now the first governor in America out of the 50 governors or 50 states, the first one to contract the virus. And he said in a newspaper at a press conference, he said, I'm pretty shocked that I'm the first governor to contract this virus. I don't know why he's so shocked when He's been, right, in restaurants, not wearing a mask. He's been around the president, not wearing a mask, right? He's been holding public events, not wearing a mask. So it's science. You shouldn't be shocked that you contracted the virus, right? So I wish him well. I hope he has a speedy and full recovery, and that this causes him to take better precautions and set an example for others, to wear masks and social distance, and stay home when necessary, so that they don't contract it and they don't give it to other people.
Thank you. Well, we hope that at least you can stay safe for us, because we're going to need you in November. So, keep on doing what you're doing to stay safe, so we can have you around. All right. So we're going to, before we go on to your platform, talk about your policy platform, I want us to read a question from an audience member. Her question is, how do you reconcile your many identities to be the best leader for the 1st District of Oklahoma?
Yeah, I think it's a benefit, right? To have so many identities and to have a broad perspective and a global perspective, right? And this is a message I want to send to, immigrants or Ghanaian-Americans or folks who've had the opportunity to live on multiple continents and travel, right? What you realize, I've been to many states all across the United States. Clearly, I've been to Ghana, grew up in Ghana. I've traveled to Mexico, traveled and studied abroad in China, all right? And when you travel, you realize that there's a difference between people that live outside of America and people that live in America. In America, we're very self-centered and self-focused, right? So we really don't pay as much attention. The everyday citizen doesn't pay as much attention to what's going on in the world and, how government systems work in other places. But when you go to China, for instance, I was so impressed with how the students knew everything about America. They knew how our government system worked. They knew who our leaders were, right? Not just from the federal level, but even down to the state level, right? And it's the same thing in Ghana, where you'll have people who study America, right? And understand how our system works. And I think that's a benefit. It makes you a better leader. It makes you a more well-rounded leader, especially in this 21st century where the world is shrunk, right? We have technology that connects us to people, right? I've had all these interviews with media outlets in Ghana, and I'm sitting here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so it's not just about, one place, one location. We have to have a broader perspective, and we have to understand how our policies, our actions affect not just us and our neighborhood, but, our city, our state, our nation, right? Our global region, and then our global world. So I take it all in, and I embrace all my different identities and all the different things I've learned to help me be a better leader, to help me better empathize. So that's the word, empathy, right? That's the word that we need. That's a word that an emotion that our current president lacks. Right? He doesn't have any capacity to empathize with people who are not like him, who do not look like him or sound like him, right? And so that's what I use my multiple identities to help me do, is to empathize and put myself in the shoes of others.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell me where do you fall on the political spectrum? These days, it matters to identify yourself either as an establishment candidate or as a progressive candidate. And, in between is, some people fall in between. So tell me, where do you fall on that scale?
Yeah, well, I'm a Democrat, and I'm running as a Democrat. I'm the Democratic nominee for Congress in the 1st Congressional District of Oklahoma. And on the ideological spectrum, I define myself as a progressive, right? Because I believe throughout the history of our country, there have always been two forces, two main forces for progress and forward movement, and then forces for regression, right? And I want to be on the right side of history. I want to be a courageous leader who's making decisions that may not always be popular, but they have an eye towards our history, our present circumstances, and the kind of future we want to build moving forward. And so I believe that we need progressive solutions that are as big and large as the problems we face, right? And so that's where I fall, and that's how I define myself on the ideological spectrum.
Okay, thank you for that insight. Now tell us, what is your policy platform? What are you running on?
Okay, so um, my platform is really informed by my story and my journey, and who I am. And, you know, I told you guys it started with my parents, you know, my mom winning the visa lottery and having the chance to come to America in pursuit of her American dream. And so the question I ask myself is, you know, in this government for the people, of the people, by the people, right? What do the people want? And my answer is the people want an America as good as its promise. All right. Part of what makes this country great is that the founding fathers inscribed in the founding documents the words, you know, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and that they're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Right? So that means we're all created equal and we all should have access to this opportunity to pursue happiness. And that's what really shapes the American dream. And that's what shapes the American promise. And so my platform is seeking to address what are the things we need to do in order to create the kind of environment that would give citizens and people the opportunity to fulfill their highest potential and their American dream, all right? And so it's four main categories of actions that we have to take. First one is education and opportunity, right? Second category is health and economic security. Third is justice and equity. And then lastly is environment and infrastructure. All right. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I'll give you just a snapshot of how I think all those are connected and actually relevant to us right here in Oklahoma. All right. So in Oklahoma, as it relates to education and opportunity, we are ranked 49th in the nation in education funding. All right. We're also ranked about 47th in teacher pay. Okay. So we're not getting the right outcomes. The number one school-based variable to educational outcomes for kids is teachers and the quality of their teachers. So if you're not paying your teachers well and you're losing all your best teachers to other states, then you already know what kind of educational outcomes you're getting. And then, you know, we're not funding our education system very well. Okay, so that's education. So we need to fund it adequately, and we need to pay our teachers what they're worth so we can keep our best teachers and attract talented teachers to our state. Now, if you neglect education, what ends up happening is now you have a criminal justice system, right? That because of the failed kids that end up growing up, now you have to put them in prison. And so in Oklahoma, we lead the nation in incarceration rate of men and women, right? And out of 50 states, we lead the nation in that category. So there's this school to prison pipeline, all right, that we have here in Oklahoma. Okay, now you have healthcare. We are second in the nation when it comes to the percentage of people who do not have access to healthcare. Okay, so you have kids who are not being educated adequately. They're a lot of times coming from single parent households because the system has incarcerated their parents, right? And now you have working moms who are going to work, busting their tail, trying to put food on the table, right? They get sick and they can't afford health care. This is connected to my story too. My mom suffered a stroke as she was working hard in pursuit of her American dream. Because she couldn't afford the health care, she went bankrupt. All right. In America, the number one cause of bankruptcy is the inability to afford medical bills. All right. So I believe that in the wealthiest nation on earth, where we encourage people to work hard and grind, that when you get sick because of the stress that comes with it, you should not go bankrupt just because you cannot afford medical care. All right. And then the parents of the kids that I was teaching, they were working jobs at minimum wage, which is $7.25. And it's been that way for a long time, all right? It's not caught up with inflation. It's not caught up with standard of living and costs, right? And so we need to raise the minimum wage to a living wage so you don't have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to survive. So you can actually have time to spend with your kids and teach them and read to them, right? And so you see how that goes through education, healthcare, economic security, right? And then justice and equity. Let's end the failed war on drugs. Because what we found out, if you read history, is that during the Richard Nixon administration, they intentionally decided they, for their own political benefit, were going to criminalize certain drugs that were in the Black and brown community, that they could include those people. Okay, so marijuana was one of those drugs, and because of the criminalization of marijuana, it was used as an excuse to fill our prisons with Black and brown people. So even though present day marijuana is legal recreationally in 11 states and medically in 33 states, we still have men and women sitting in prison right now because they used marijuana or sold marijuana. That is unjust, all right? And it's connected to what we're seeing with police brutality and killing of unarmed Black men. Because what's happening is we are over-policing our Black and brown communities. Even though drug use is similar and equal in Black communities and white communities, the police are in the Black communities, all right? And they have these interactions with people, and it ends up like what happened with George Floyd. And so we have to fix that if we're gonna move together truly as one nation, all right? And then the last category of environment and infrastructure, we know that the global health crisis, the global warming and climate change, it's a real thing, right? We have this one planet that we all live on, right? And we have to use our ingenuity to really rethink our energy sources so we can leave a healthy, safe planet for the next generation. And so that encompasses my platform, and it's not a platform that is meant to benefit one group, right, at the expense of another. It is our responsibility as elected leaders to build environments of opportunity where people can thrive, no matter who they are, right? That's what the American dream is about, and that's what I'm trying to do, to build an America as good as its promise.
That's great. Your opponent in the elections in November, Kevin Hand, he's a freshman candidate.
Right.
He doesn't, have a lot of political, history or, his story. He was a franchisee from McDonald's, made some money doing that, and then went into politics, won the last election.
Right.
His policies, obviously are right in line with Donald Trump. That's he goes, all in for Donald Trump. That's who he supports. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, especially on immigration. I've heard a little bit about what you think about what the country should do in terms of immigration. I want you to expand on that a little bit. But before I do that, I have a question for you that one of the audience members put. He asked, should the United States allow the same number or lesser or more refugees into the country? So if you can, answer that question, and then, when you finish, I'll ask you some few more questions about immigration.
Yeah, the excuse Donald Trump uses when it comes to refugees, one, he seeks to denigrate them and call them all names and criminals and whatnot, which is not true. But he also, spits in the face of our allies, right? And doesn't work in a cooperative manner with other nations and leaders of other nations. When it comes to refugees and the refugee crisis, it has to be a global effort, right, and collaboration, so that we don't just have one nation bearing the brunt of, right, our refugees crisis. And we have to really actually address our foreign policy, right, that necessitates, right, and creates refugees in the first place, right? And so I think the number that you take in is based on, right, the collaboration with other countries, right, and who is taking in, how many, and how many are we able to take and accommodate, right? But it should come from a spirit of, these are folks who are fleeing dangerous situations, right? Created through no fault of their own. And so we should look upon them with compassion, because if the roles were reversed, we would want somebody to look on us with compassion, right? And so that's how I approach it. When it comes to immigration, broadly speaking, we have to understand, like, words matter, right? And history matters. Um, we are a nation. America is a nation of immigrants, right? So I live in Oklahoma, where there are a lot of Native Americans here, all right, as relative to other states. And so we understand, unless you're Native American, you came here from somewhere else, all right? So this is a nation of immigrants. It's also a nation of laws, right? So it is incumbent upon our lawmakers in Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform, all right, and fix our broken immigration laws and our broken immigration system. We have over 11 million undocumented folks here living in America, all right? You are not going to deport all 11 million people. So if Donald Trump says he wants to deport, that's not going to happen. You know, it's practically impossible, and you shouldn't do it. These folks are contributing to our economy. They're working just as hard as anybody else, if not more. They're paying taxes, right? And so it is incumbent upon us to pass laws that give them a pathway to legal status and citizenship, all right? And that's how we have to deal with that. Building a wall is not going to fix the problem, all right? And all immigrants are not rapists, right? Anybody coming from Mexico is not a rapist and a killer. That is a lie. And so we have to realize that that is an American value of being a nation of immigrants and a nation of laws. And my personal story, being a son of immigrants, I understand this, all right? And I'm going to work hard to ensure that I can be a champion for fixing our immigration system so we can all move forward together.
Thank you. You know, and I think we have to also applaud the recent decision by the Supreme Court allowing the Dreamers to live in the country, you know, at least until for the foreseeable future. You know, probably after the elections, something else will come up. But now, you know, they defeated President Trump's agenda to deport these Dreamers. You know, so that's a good thing. And also, he backtracked on his recent decision to, you know, expel all these international students who are taking classes online because of COVID-19. I mean, sometimes the things that you hear from this president, you know, it's quite amazing that he thinks like that. But, you know, again, you know, we are thankful that he, you know, he backtracked on that. There's one more question on immigration, and then, you know, we have about 9 minutes left. So let me ask that. He said, how are you able to encourage immigrants to buy into your progressive agenda, considering that you are a progressive yourself?
Yeah, you know, I think by just telling my story, you know, growing up, my parents didn't say this explicitly, but you got the sense, right, that the spirit of our civic engagement came with an ethos that said, you know, this isn't really your country, so you got to be quiet, you know, stay under the radar, you know, don't ruffle any feathers, and hope for the best, right? And I think my generation, we're realizing that, you know, democracy is not a spectator sport. You can't sit on the sidelines. You are a citizen, you're a resident, even if you have a green card, right? You have a right to be here and participate in our democracy, all right? And you can't just, you know, relinquish that. And you pay taxes just like everybody else, right? So you deserve, you know, to have your roads, right, paved, to have your trash, right, picked up, right, to have all these different issues that affect you addressed by the leaders, right, that you elect. And so, so it starts there with realizing that we're not second-class citizens just because we are immigrants or we're born to immigrants, right? We're just as much a part of this country as anybody else. And so we have to raise our voice. And then we also actually have a unique perspective on America because we're seeing it almost from the outside. We can make a case for what really makes America great, what makes people risk their lives or sacrifice and leave family, friends, and familiar settings behind to come here, right? That says something about what they're thinking about what makes America great, right? And we can send that message about what truly makes America great and what it's going to take to sustain that greatness, right? And what policies we need to put in place to help everybody to achieve the American dream that we so much identify with when we're living in all these other places, you know, around the globe. And so if I just stay true to that and stick to that and show people that it's okay to require of your elected leaders to make decisions that benefit you as a citizen, then they will see the wisdom of my progressive agenda.
Yes, thank you for touching on that. And that really resonates with me. And I always say this, that as long as we continue to live in this country, wherever we came from, as long as we come here, we live here, we work here, we build, we raise kids, we have to buy into what we've signed up for. We have to own it, right? We can't say, oh, we're not visitors, we're not guests, we're here, we're living here.
Right.
So as you said, we pay taxes, we work really hard, we help to build America every single day. Look at the COVID-19 crisis. A lot of Africans are out there in the hospitals and nursing homes taking care of everybody, right? So we are equally a part of this system, and we have to claim it, for as long as we live in this country. So I'm glad you mentioned that, and I hope that the next generation, or the generation that are right now not looking at these things and embracing them, they can rethink and see that yes, they can do what you are doing. You've set the pace. Right now we have you at that helm, and we believe that it's going to continue to improve and get better. I can't tell you how many times I hear parents say, one day I wish my daughter or my son can become president like Barack Obama or something like, we keep hearing that. And now we've seen you doing it at that level. And we believe that that will continue to grow. Now, I have a last interesting question for you before you tell us, your final words. But the question is, recently, the Congressional Black Caucus, we saw them wearing the kente cloth. And they've won it a few times, the last couple of years. And there were a lot of controversy over why they were wearing the kente cloth. So my question to you, if you win in November, would you join the Congressional Black Caucus in wearing the Ghana kente cloth to hopefully Biden's inauguration?
Well, yeah, well, obviously, I am from Ghana, right? My parents are from Ghana. It wouldn't be the first time I've worn a kente cloth, right? So I reserve every right to wear my kente cloth with pride and without any guilt of, what is it? What is the cultural misappropriation or anything of that nature, right? So yeah, so I mean, I'm looking for. I've talked to few Ghanaian-Americans who've mentioned that once you win, we're going to be in there in the Capitol in our kente, cloth and celebrating this victory, not just for Oklahomans and Americans, but for Ghanaians as well. So that'll be exciting. And, I don't just want members of the Congressional Black Caucus to wear the kente cloth just to make a statement. I would hope that they would understand the history of the kente cloth, history of, where it comes from, the history of, Ghana and, other African nations, and also how they can act to help tell our story and help build a better world, right, for all of us, brothers and sisters in this global community. So yeah, I mean, that's not a hard question at all. I'm kente cloth all the way.
Great. So finally, many of us are not living in your district, in the first district in Oklahoma, where your election will be taking place. But as you've heard and as I've mentioned, there are a lot of support for you. Many Ghanaians are asking how they can support you. So in your final words, tell us how we can support you. Many of us are praying for you, but there are many things that we can do. So tell us what we can do to support you, even though we don't live in your district.
Yes. Well, first and foremost, go to my website, kojoforcongress.com, KOJOFOR Congress.com, to learn more about my story, my platform, all right, and the message and what I'm trying to do. Second of all, I want you to know that, unfortunately, it takes a lot of money to run a congressional race and to run for office. And I am running against an opponent who is a multi-millionaire, right? And he last time donated $1.3 million of his own money to his campaign. I'm not a millionaire, I'm a law school grad who became a kindergarten teacher to build a better world for myself, our kids, and the next generation. And so I need all the financial support I can get to be able to get my message across to all the people in my district, right? Close to 500,000 registered voters in my district. I have to be able to have commercials, have paid staff, have canvassers, right? And then it's compounded in this coronavirus environment, right, where you can't really go door to door. So I need your financial contributions, right? And so, go to my website, kojoforcongress.com/donate, and you can donate right there. And every little bit helps. $5, $10, 20, 15, 50, 100, right? It all helps. And then you donate, send the link to your friends, to your family, right, to other Ghanaian-American communities all around the country, and tell them that they need to support me, and my victory is their victory, right? If I'm able to win and become the first Ghanaian-American to win a seat in Congress, that sends a huge message, right, to our kids that it's possible, that their dreams are possible. Sends a huge message to our country that the American dream can actually be actualized if only we gave people an opportunity, all right, to work hard and make those dreams come true. So I'm running for all of us, and I do need your support. It'll be sad for me to have the right message, the right story, to be the right messenger, and lose because not enough people got to hear our message, because we didn't have enough money to be able to, run commercials or, get to everybody in our district, right? So I'm begging you to donate and help us. So when we win, it's not going to be I did this. It's going to be we did this. We did it together. All right. So I appreciate it so much, and we're looking forward to being able to win in November and bringing this home.
That's great. And on that note, I want to end with this. Dr. Martin Luther King said something about us moving forward as a people. And he said, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But by all means, keep on moving forward. Kojo, I thank you for joining us today. I believe that you're not only moving forward for yourself and for your family, you moving all of us forward as a people. And for that, I thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you. And I hope the message goes out there and we'll continue to support you all the way through. Thank you very much for joining us. And audiences, thank you for joining us. And we'll continue to bring you panelists such as Kojo. And there are many others in line who are waiting to talk to you about engaging in a civic way and being a socially responsible citizen.